So, welcome back to the class. I know it's been quite a big delay and much longer than I expected, but I've been working very hard to reconceive the course and to really get us to do projects that are engaging with the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, which I think is urgent and very pertinent. And it can lead to really interesting and I think productive projects for you for writing class. So, in this video, I am going to do some review because it's been a while. And I know I put the slides up, but as some of the students were looking at them, they were kind of hard to understand without any kind of explanation, which I had done in class or intended to do in class. I think our group in particular got cut off and shortened because of the preparations for the hurricane. So we left the class early, so I didn't get to talk. And so now I'm going to review that. I'm going to review the critical reading and the concepts of rhetoric and the rhetorical situation, and then how this connects to writing and writing essays, because that will be the bulk of your work for the course, right? You'll be required, remember, to write 2 main essays. One will be this first essay, which I'm calling the survival essay, and then the second will be a research-based essay. And we're going to talk about those projects. I've mentioned it to some students that came to the labs and got some workshop, that it will be tied with local Grand Bahamian issues, okay? And in particular, one's related to the hurricane. So I really want to engage this topic, as I said, and that's been part of my struggle to reconceive the course. And also I'm working on other projects to tie it into the work that we're going to do in this class. So I'll explain more when we get to the research-based essay. But for now, let's start by reviewing the idea about critical reading. Critical reading in the university is kind of going beyond the literal meaning and just reading to kind of understand what people say. Okay, so it's more than what meets the eye, right? You want to really focus on the text, and you have to get in and engage with that text, right? And one way that you can do this is by thinking about what in classical rhetoric, and rhetoric is the study of how to effectively convince or persuade others. Now, it began in classical Greece, so they were mostly talking about oral arguments. And but we can take those concepts and still apply it to anything we read or anything we watch, any kind of message that's given to us. And we can also use these concepts to help us become better writers by understanding the rhetorical situation. So whenever you're confronting a text, you're really confronted with what we call the rhetorical situation. This is also called the rhetorical triangle, which is the author, the audience, and the text, right? It's not just a text. There's also someone who presented this or wrote this, and for a particular audience, right? So when you're coming into the reading, you have to think about the author. Or what is my knowledge about the author? Maybe you know nothing about the author. That is very different than when you are very familiar with an author, or the person is famous and very well known, or you are given background information about the author. You also have to be thinking about what is the purpose of the author. Why are they writing this? What is their main purpose here? Now, again, some things are very obvious. A news item, a textbook in school, a short story, a movie. Some of them are very obvious what the purpose is, but other times when professors give you something and you're not really sure where it originally came from, it's unclear what the purpose is, except that I have to read this for class. So sometimes you have to dig for purpose. Now, tied with purpose is the text itself, right? Looking at the text, right? So you want to think about, what is my knowledge about the text? Now, that includes the genre or the form that it takes, the type of story it is, the type of writing, the type of language used. Obviously, if a writer is using Spanish and English together in an essay, that might be difficult if your Spanish is not so good, or any other language. Also, the language might be more complex for specialists and you don't really understand the concepts, or it might be very informal, very vernacular language. And even your Bahamian Creole English, which will be a very different type of text to read. And then, of course, the medium. The medium is just like, how is this message conveyed? When we're talking about text, we don't always mean actual words on paper, right? We mean some kind of big message. It could be a meme, it could be an image, it could be a video. A text can be an article, it can be a PowerPoint slide. So, but what is the medium? Is it visual? Is it audio? Is it, text-based, meaning written on the paper or written on a page? So the medium can also change what is being conveyed, right? And then you think about the audience. What is your knowledge of the audience? Are you part of the intended audience who this author is talking to? Or are you kind of outside of it? That's something to consider. So you take these and then you think about the context, right? There's always a context for this rhetorical situation, the bigger context. So what is your knowledge about the social, historical, cultural moment that this message is being presented, this text? If it's something current today, then it's very obvious to you what it is, right? If you write something today about disaster preparedness versus something you wrote in January or February or June, which is the beginning of hurricane season, those are very different contexts. Writing about hurricane preparedness in June 2019 and, of course, October 2019, because the situation has changed, the context has changed. Okay. So this is really what we talk about, the rhetorical situation. Traditionally, it's usually just author, audience, text. Like I said, they call that the triangle or the rhetorical triangle. But now we like to think of these broader issues like the context. And the reader actively constructs meaning. And I really want to emphasize this, and I emphasized in class, if I got to this, that you, as a reader, you combine all you know about all these elements. And it's complex. And the more complex the text is, the more complex the meaning can be, right? The interpretation. So all of us come as readers with different knowledges. We have different knowledge of the author, of the genre, of the language, of the medium, of the audience, of the topic, what they're writing about. If you are, reading an article about a big pop star like Rihanna and you know her work and you're a fan of hers, when somebody writes about her, you're going to know a lot and you're going to get a lot from that. Likewise, if you're reading about sports or basketball and you're a huge fan and you follow your team and someone's writing about the team, you know the players, you know the coaches, you know the history of their record, going through different seasons. You really, you have a lot of meaning there versus someone from Singapore who knows English but has never watched NBA. And then if they're talking about Jonquil Jones, they don't even know there's such a thing as the WNBA. And you know what I mean? So your background really, knowledge of all these elements really changes how much you understand. And again, to talk about the context in terms of when something's written in the social, historical, cultural context, like I said, if you're reading an article about hurricane preparedness even if you're reading it today in October in Singapore, well, that might not matter, right? Singapore is not hit by hurricanes. If you're reading about that, even in the United States, you might not even have on your mind that there was a big hurricane here in the Bahamas. Whereas if we read something about hurricane preparedness today, that's going to have a very different meaning for us. So all of these things come together where you construct a different meaning. And so we have different meanings. There is not just one meaning of a text because we all bring to bear different elements of this knowledge. And it's complex. It's very complex. And the more that you know about these elements, the deeper, the richer the meaning can be. So that's a wrap up of the rhetorical situation. I just want to review that, and in the next video, I will get into reviewing the critical reading process. So be sure to watch the next video. Thanks.